He transport ship carrying Ambassador Thomas Webb descended through layers of atmospheric shields that surrounded the Galactic Council headquarters. Through the viewport, he could see the massive structure floating in the void between star systems. A station so large it had its own artificial gravity wells. The building itself looked like a crystal mountain turned upside down. With thousands of lights representing thousands of different worlds, Webb felt his hands trembling slightly. He clasped them together to hide the nervous gesture from his two companions. Dr. Lisa Monroe sat to his left, reviewing data on her tablet for the 100th time. Captain David Torres sat on his right, his military posture rigid and formal. None of them spoke. They all understood what was at stake. 20 years ago, humanity had received its first message from the stars. The Galactic Council had welcomed Earth as a new member species, but with strict conditions. Humans had to disarm most of their military forces. They had to accept observers on their homeworld. They had to follow rules that seemed designed to keep humanity weak and contained. But the Council promised protection, promised trade, promised a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. Now, everything was falling apart. The transport docked at a receiving platform. Automated systems guided them through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Webb noticed that every surface was designed to accommodate different species. Some sections had water-filled tubes for aquatic beings. Others had temperature controls for species that required extreme heat or cold. The Council represented 847 different civilizations, and every one of them would be watching today. They entered the main chamber, and Webb stopped walking for a moment, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. The room stretched 3 kilometers in every direction. Platforms hung at different heights, each holding representatives from various species. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Webb's mind struggled to process their shapes. At the center of it all, a circular platform waited, bathed in harsh white light. "That's where we'll stand," Torres whispered. "The Judgment Circle?" A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language that Webb's translation implant converted to English. "The Council recognizes the human delegation. You may enter the circle." Webb walked forward, his footsteps echoing despite the vastness of the space. Monroe and Torres followed. As they reached the platform, the light intensified, making it hard to see the thousands of alien eyes watching them from above. A figure appeared on the highest platform. It was humanoid, but twice as tall as any human, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. This was High Arbiter Kelthinus, the voice of the Council's ruling body. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of centuries. "Ambassador Thomas Webb of Earth, you and your species stand accused of the highest crimes against galactic law. The evidence suggests that human military vessels attacked and destroyed 3 ships belonging to the Vrul Combine. 217 lives were lost. This constitutes an act of war and a violation of the Treaty of Non-Interference that Earth agreed to upon joining this council." The chamber erupted with sound. Hundreds of species began speaking at once, some in languages that Webb's implant couldn't translate. The noise was overwhelming, a wall of alien voices demanding justice, demanding punishment, demanding that humanity be expelled from civilized space. Another figure appeared on a platform to the left. This one looked like an insect the size of a human, with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles. "The Vrul Combine demands immediate reparations," the creature said. "We demand that Earth surrender its remaining military forces. We demand that those responsible for this massacre face trial." More voices joined in. A species that looked like living crystals demanded Earth be quarantined. Another species, resembling octopuses floating in containment suits, called for economic sanctions. A third species, covered in what appeared to be metallic scales, suggested that humanity had proven itself too dangerous for membership in the Council. Through it all, Webb remained silent. He had been instructed to wait, to let them speak, to let them reveal their true intentions. Kelthinus raised a hand and the chamber fell quiet. "Ambassador Webb, you have heard the accusations. The Council has reviewed the evidence. Your military vessels were tracked near the Theta 9 colony. 3 Vrul ships were destroyed in that sector. Human weapon signatures were detected. What defense can you possibly offer? Webb took a slow breath. This was the moment. Everything humanity had prepared for came down to the next few minutes. High Arbiter, he said, his voice calm and steady. May I present evidence to the Council before any judgment is passed? Kelphinus regarded him with an expression that might have been curiosity or contempt. Webb couldn't tell with alien faces. You may present your evidence, but understand that the facts speak clearly. We expect your cooperation and acceptance of responsibility. Of course, Webb said. He glanced at Monroe, who activated a holographic projector. We did come here to present evidence. We came to explain what happened at Theta 9. Images began to appear in the air around the Judgment Circle. They showed the colony, a small settlement on the edge of human-controlled space. Then the images showed Vrul ships arriving. More images showed something that made several species in the chamber shift uncomfortably. For 3 months, Webb continued, the Vrul Combine has been abducting human colonists from Theta 9. 2,000 people disappeared. When our scouts investigated, they discovered why. The holograms changed to show the interior of a Vrul facility. What they revealed made even some of the alien representatives recoil. Humans strapped to tables. Medical equipment surrounding them. Vrul scientists conducting experiments that could only be described as torture. They were studying us, Webb said, his voice harder now. Dissecting us. Testing our pain thresholds. Mapping our neural systems while we were still conscious. And they were selling that data to other species. The chamber erupted again, but this time with a different tone. Some species shouted denials. Others demanded to know if the images were authentic. The Vrul representative clicked his mandibles rapidly, a sign of agitation. Monroe stepped forward. We recovered these records from a Vrul data core. The files are authenticated. We have the names of the scientists involved. We also have records showing that 4 other council species purchased this research. 2 more made inquiries about acquiring live human specimens for their own studies. This is a fabrication, the Vrul representative shouted. Humans lie to cover their crimes. Webb turned to face the insect-like alien. Then explain the data we recovered. Explain the 2,000 missing colonists. Explain why your ships attacked our diplomatic vessel when we tried to negotiate for their return. That statement sent another wave of shock through the chamber. Kelphinus leaned forward. You're claiming the Vrul attacked a diplomatic ship? 27 humans died, Torres said, speaking for the first time. His voice was cold and military precise. Including Ambassador Webb's daughter. She was serving as a junior diplomat. The Vrul fired on a vessel flying under a flag of truce. Webb closed his eyes for a moment, the pain still fresh. When he opened them, his expression had changed. No more diplomatic pleasantries. No more careful words. So yes, High Arbiter, we destroyed 3 Vrul ships. But that's not why we're really here today. He looked up at Kelphinus, then let his gaze sweep across the entire chamber. We're here to tell you what happened after they killed our people. We're here to explain what Earth did in response. The chamber went silent. Every representative leaned forward, waiting. You want to know what we did? Webb asked quietly. We showed the Vrul Combine what happens when you mistake human patience for weakness. We showed them what evolution on a death world creates. We showed them what happens when you threaten our families. Kelphinus's voice carried a new edge. What exactly did you do, Ambassador? Webb nodded to Torres, who activated another holographic display. It showed a star system. The Vrul home system, with its 15 planets and billions of inhabitants? We ended them, Webb said simply. The Vrul Combine no longer exists as a military power. As of 6 hours ago, they couldn't defend a single planet if they wanted to. The chamber exploded into chaos. Kelphinus slammed his hand against a control panel, and a deep gong sound resonated through the chamber, demanding silence. The alien voices slowly quieted, but Webb could feel the tension crackling like electricity through the vast space. Every representative was staring at the humans now. And Webb couldn't tell if what he saw in their alien faces was fear or rage. You claim to have destroyed an entire civilization's military capacity in hours, Kelthinus said slowly. This is either the greatest lie ever told to this council, or the greatest act of aggression in galactic history. Which is it, Ambassador? Neither, Webb replied. It's justice. And a warning. The Vrul representative's mandibles clicked furiously. This human speaks madness. The Combine has a fleet of 10,000 ships. We have defensive installations on 40 planets. We have weapons capable of destroying stars. No species could neutralize our forces in mere hours, let alone a primitive race like humanity. Dr. Monroe stepped forward, her fingers dancing across her tablet. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed timelines and data streams. Then perhaps you can explain why your central military command went dark 18 hours ago. Or why every one of your warships has stopped responding. Or why your defensive satellites are now floating debris. Webb watched the Vrul representative carefully. The alien's multiple eyes widened, and his body language shifted from aggressive to defensive. He was checking something, probably trying to contact his homeworld. The delay in his response told Webb everything he needed to know. The Vrul were just now realizing the truth. Let me walk you through what happened, Torres said, his military bearing commanding attention. He manipulated the holographic display, showing a timeline. Hour 0, your people attacked our diplomatic vessel. By hour 1, Earth's War Council had convened. By hour 2, we had made our decision. By hour 3, we deployed our response. By hour 8, your military installations began failing. By hour 16, your government realized you weren't fighting a conventional enemy. What did you deploy? Asked a new voice. It came from Ambassador Vryn of the Korthax Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful species on the Council. The Korthax looked vaguely reptilian, with scales that shimmered in different colors depending on their mood. Right now, Vryn's scales showed patterns that Webb's briefing materials had identified as indicating serious concern. We deployed something we hoped we'd never have to use, Monroe said. She pulled up technical diagrams that made several species in the chamber lean forward with interest. Nanoscale autonomous weapon systems. Each unit is smaller than a single cell. We call them dismantlers. The chamber went very quiet. Webb knew why. Nanotechnology was considered theoretical by most council species. The risks were too great, the control mechanisms too unreliable. Most civilizations had banned research into self-replicating nanosystems centuries ago. Each dismantler has one programmed directive, Monroe continued. Locate and dismantle Vrul military systems. Not Vrul civilians, not Vrul infrastructure. Just anything related to their ability to project military force, warships, weapons platforms, military communications, command centers, power generation for military bases. Torres brought up footage from Vrul space. The images showed massive warships simply coming apart, their hulls separating into component molecules. Weapons installations collapsing into dust. Satellites breaking down into their base elements. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The dismantlers replicate using materials from the systems they break down, Monroe explained. Each one we deployed made copies of itself. They spread exponentially through the Vrul system. 20 hours after deployment, the Vrul Combine had no functional military capability remaining. You're monsters, the Vrul representative whispered. You destroyed everything. No, Webb said sharply. We destroyed your ability to hurt people. Your cities still stand. Your people still live. Your civilian infrastructure is untouched. We specifically programmed the dismantlers to avoid any system that wasn't military in nature. Not a single Vrul civilian died in this operation. He let that sink in before continuing. Compare that to what you did. You abducted 2,000 humans. You tortured them. You cut them apart while they were still alive. You sold data about their suffering. And when we tried to talk, you killed 27 more people, including a 23-year-old woman who believed in peace and diplomacy. Webb's voice broke slightly on the last words, but he forced himself to continue. So don't you dare call us monsters. We could have done to you what you did to us. We could have targeted your civilians. We could have made you suffer. Instead, we surgically removed your ability to threaten anyone ever again. That's not monstrous. That's merciful. Several species in the chamber began speaking at once. Webb caught fragments of conversation. Some were expressing shock at the rule's actions. Others were focused on the implications of human nanotechnology. A few seemed to be reconsidering humanity's place in the galactic order. Kelthanus raised his hand for silence again. Ambassador Monroe, are these dismantlers still active? No, Monroe said. They had a programmed lifespan. After completing their mission, they broke down into inert molecules. They no longer exist, but you could make more, Vryn said. It wasn't a question. Webb met the Korthax ambassador's gaze directly. Yes, we could. The implications of that simple statement rippled through the chamber. Every species present understood what it meant. Humanity had just demonstrated a weapon that could neutralize any military force in the galaxy, and they had the ability to do it again. This changes nothing, Vryn said, his scales shifting to patterns that indicated anger. You've admitted to possessing a weapon that threatens every species in this chamber. You've used it to destroy the military of a council member species. These actions cannot be tolerated. Other voices joined in agreement. The crystalline species demanded that Earth surrender the dismantler technology immediately. The aquatic species called for human vessels to be banned from certain sectors. A dozen other species proposed various sanctions and restrictions. Webb waited for the voices to die down. He had expected this reaction. In fact, he had counted on it. You want our technology, he said. You want to study it, control it, maybe use it yourselves. Or you want to make sure we can never use it again. I understand that. What you don't understand is that we're done playing by your rules. Kelthonus's expression hardened. Explain yourself, Ambassador. Torres stepped forward again, pulling up new data. For 20 years, Earth followed every rule the Council imposed. We reduced our military by 70%. We allowed observers into our most sensitive facilities. We accepted trade restrictions that cost us trillions. We did everything you asked because we wanted to be part of galactic civilization. And in return, Monroe added, we discovered that the Council isn't what you claim it to be. We found evidence of 17 different operations targeting humanity. The Vrul abductions were just the most obvious. Other species were buying human genetic material on black markets. Some were planning similar experiments. A few were discussing whether humanity should be restricted to Earth permanently. The hologram shifted again, showing communications between various council species. Webb watched as representatives from multiple civilizations saw their private messages displayed for all to see. Messages discussing humanity as if they were laboratory animals. Debates about whether humans were too dangerous to allow off their homeworld. Calculations about how to keep humanity contained while extracting value from human biology and technology. This is a violation of diplomatic protocols, Vryn protested. These communications were classified. So were the plans to abduct and experiment on my people, Webb shot back. So were the discussions about restricting humanity's expansion. So were the assessments that called us manageable if controlled early. You want to talk about violations? Let's talk about the council committee that spent 6 months debating whether to place permanent restrictions on human reproduction rates. That revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several species began demanding explanations. Others tried to shout down the accusations. The careful facade of council unity was cracking apart. Kelthanus looked genuinely shaken. If these accusations are true, they represent serious breaches of council law. But Ambassador, you must understand that revealing classified diplomatic communications is also a serious offense. And the deployment of your dismantlers, regardless of justification, cannot be ignored. Webb nodded slowly. I agree. Our actions can't be ignored. That's why we're not here to ask for forgiveness. We're here to explain why everything is about to change. The chamber descended into chaos again. Webb stood in the judgment circle, watching as thousands of years of galactic order began to unravel. Representatives were shouting at each other now, not at the humans. Ancient alliances were fracturing in real time. Species that had cooperated for centuries were demanding explanations from each other about who knew what and when. Kelthanus struggled to restore order, but his voice was lost in the noise. Webb glanced at Torres and Monroe. They both nodded. This was going according to plan, though plan was perhaps too strong a word. They had known that revealing the truth would cause chaos. They had counted on it. Finally, a sound like thunder rolled through the chamber. It came from the Korthax platforms where Ambassador Vryn had activated some kind of sonic amplification. The noise was painful enough that every species fell silent. Enough, Vryn said, his scales showing patterns of command. This dissolves into meaningless noise. We must address the core issue. Humanity has revealed a weapon that threatens the security of every council member. They have used this weapon against a member species, regardless of provocation. They have accessed classified council communications. These are facts and they demand a response. Several species voiced agreement. Webb could see the political calculus happening. The older, more powerful civilizations were reasserting control, trying to contain the damage. They wanted to focus on humanity's actions, not on the evidence of their own corruption. You're right, Webb said, his voice cutting through the cam. These are facts. So let me add one more fact to your list. In the 20 years since joining the Council, humanity has analyzed your technology, studied your military capabilities, and run simulations of what would happen in a direct conflict. Torres pulled up a new set of displays. They showed strategic assessments, fleet compositions, industrial capacity comparisons. We know the strength of every major Council species. We know your weapons, your tactics, your supply lines. We've studied every major conflict in recorded galactic history. And we've reached a conclusion. In a direct military confrontation, Monroe said, humanity would win. The chamber exploded with derisive sounds from dozens of species. Laughter, scoffing, outraged protests. The idea that humanity, barely 2 decades into space travel, could defeat civilizations that had been spacefaring for thousands of years seemed absurd. Webb let them laugh. Then he spoke again. Not immediately, not without cost, but eventually, inevitably, we would win. Do you want to know why? Vryn's scales showed skepticism, but he gestured for Webb to continue. Because we think differently than you do, Webb said. Take the dismantlers as an example. Most of you abandoned nanotechnology centuries ago because you couldn't solve the control problem. You were afraid of creating something you couldn't stop. But we're a species that grew up on a planet trying to kill us every day. We learned to use dangerous tools because the alternative was extinction. Torres expanded the tactical displays. Look at your fleet compositions. Every major Council species follows similar design philosophies. Large capital ships, centralized command structures, predictable engagement patterns. You've been fighting the same way for so long that you can't imagine alternatives. Humans spent our entire history fighting each other, Monroe added. We developed hundreds of different warfare doctrines. We learned to adapt, to innovate, to find asymmetric solutions to overwhelming force. While you were perfecting the same tactics over millennia, we were evolving new ones every generation. Webb walked to the edge of the judgment circle. And here's what really matters, our industrial capacity. Earth can build ships, weapons, and infrastructure faster than any 3 Council species combined. We have 8 billion people working on a unified mission. We have an economy built on competition and innovation. We have the hunger of a species that's still climbing, not the complacency of those who reached the top and stopped. This is arrogance, Vryn said, though his scales showed less certainty now. You base this on simulations and assumptions. Real war is different. You're right, Webb agreed. Real war is different. It's messy and unpredictable, which is exactly why we'd win. Because we're comfortable with chaos. You've had peace for so long that you've forgotten what total war actually means. We haven't. Every human alive grew up learning about wars that consumed entire continents. conflicts that lasted generations, industrial mobilization that transformed whole civilizations. He let that sink in before continuing. The dismantlers? That's just one weapon system. We have others. Some that use biology instead of nanotechnology. Some that exploit vulnerabilities in council communication protocols. Some that you wouldn't see coming until it was too late. We spent 20 years preparing for the possibility that the council wasn't what you claimed to be. And everything we discovered proved we were right to prepare. Monroe pulled up more evidence. The council isn't a democracy. It's an oligarchy. The oldest species maintain power by ensuring younger civilizations never threaten them. The rules you gave us weren't about maintaining peace. They were about keeping us weak. The Treaty of Non-Interference that everyone keeps citing? Torres added. We found 73 documented cases of council species violating it in the last decade alone. But those violations were ignored or excused because they involved powerful civilizations. The rules only apply to species like ours. Webb watched as the implications spread through the chamber. Some species were denying the accusations. Others were trying to deflect. But a significant number were silent, and that silence was telling. They knew the truth. They had always known. So here's our position, Webb said. We're not asking for permission anymore. We're not accepting your judgment. We're done pretending that the council is anything other than a system designed to maintain the power of old civilizations at the expense of new ones. Kelthanus leaned forward. You speak of leaving the council, of establishing yourselves as a separate power. Do you understand what that means? You would be declaring yourselves enemies of galactic civilization? No, Webb said firmly. We're declaring ourselves independent of a broken system. There's a difference. Vrin's scales shifted to patterns of anger. You threaten war with your words. You demonstrate weapons of mass destruction. You violate our protocols and reveal classified information. And now you claim moral authority. This is unacceptable. Webb met the Korthax ambassador's gaze. Then what would you have us do? Submit to judgment for defending our people? Surrender our weapons while you keep yours? Accept restrictions that don't apply to you? Continue being second-class citizens in a system that views us as resources to be exploited? He shook his head. We tried playing by your rules. We trusted you. And you proved that trust was misplaced. The Vrul abducted our people because they thought we were weak. They thought the council would protect them. They were wrong. Torres pulled up the final set of strategic data. The dismantlers proved something important. They proved that technological superiority doesn't belong to old civilizations anymore. Innovation matters more than age. Adaptability matters more than tradition. And willingness to take risks matters more than caution. Monroe added her assessment. We shared the theoretical principles behind the dismantlers with 3 other species. Younger civilizations that have faced similar exploitation. They're developing their own versions right now. The monopoly on advanced technology that the Council has maintained for centuries. It's over. That revelation sent another shockwave through the chamber. Representatives were accessing data feeds, checking with their intelligence services, trying to confirm if this was true. Webb could see the fear spreading. The old order was realizing they couldn't contain this. You're fracturing the Council, Kelthanus said. His voice carried a mixture of anger and something that might have been sadness. Thousands of years of cooperation, destroyed by one reckless species. Cooperation? Webb laughed bitterly. Is that what you call it when powerful species exploit weaker ones? When committees secretly debate how to restrict species that might challenge your dominance? When abductions and experiments happen and everyone looks the away because the victims don't matter? He pointed at the Vrul representative. They tortured 2,000 humans. They killed 27 diplomats. And your first response wasn't to condemn them. It was to put us on trial. That tells us everything we need to know about Council justice. Webb took a deep breath, forcing his anger down. But we're not here to destroy the Council. We're here to save it. From itself. Vrin's scales showed confusion. Explain. We're giving you a choice, Webb said. Reform or become irrelevant. Change the system or watch as younger species build a new one without you. You can maintain your power by adapting, or you can lose it by refusing to change. Torres brought up a document. These are humanity's terms for remaining in the council. They're not negotiable. The terms appeared as text in multiple languages across the chamber. Webb watched as representatives read them, their reactions varying from shock to outrage to calculation. You demand permanent seats on the Security Council, Vrin said. You demand trials for 17 species. You demand the abolition of junior species classifications. You demand complete equality with civilizations thousands of years older than yours. This is extortion. No, Webb said quietly. This is justice. This is what the Council should have been all along. A place where every species has equal rights and equal protection, where age doesn't equal authority and power doesn't excuse exploitation. He looked up at Kelthinus. You have a choice to make, High Arbiter. All of you do. Stand with the old ways and watch them crumble, or build something better with us. Kelthinus called for a recess. The High Arbiter looked decades older than he had at the beginning of the session, his shimmer skin dulled by stress. Webb and his team were escorted to a waiting chamber, a transparent room that overlooked the vast diplomatic district surrounding the council headquarters. Through the walls, they could see ships from hundreds of worlds, each one representing a civilization with its own history and priorities. Do you think they'll accept? Monroe asked quietly. Webb stared out at the ships. Some will. Others won't. The question is whether enough of them understand that the old way is finished. Torres was monitoring communications traffic. Encrypted channels are going crazy. Every major species is contacting their home governments. Some are already positioning fleets. Let them, Webb said. If they want a war, we'll give them one. But they know what that means now. Mutually assured destruction has a way of encouraging rational thinking. 2 hours passed. Then 4, Webb used the time to review contingency plans. There were protocols for every possible outcome. If the Council accepted humanity's terms, Earth would become a major power in galactic politics. If they rejected the terms, humanity would withdraw and form an alliance with other younger species. If they attempted to use force, well, the dismantlers weren't the only weapon in Earth's arsenal. Finally, they were summoned back to the chamber. The atmosphere had changed. The chaotic energy from before had been replaced by something colder, more calculated. Webb could feel thousands of alien eyes watching as he returned to the judgment circle. Kelthinus spoke first. The Council has deliberated. Before we announce our decision, several representatives wish to address the human delegation directly. A new figure appeared on one of the platforms. The species looked like Livingstone, with crystals growing from its body. Webb's database identified them as the Quorith, one of the oldest civilizations in the galaxy. We are disturbed by humanity's actions, the Quorith representative said, its voice like grinding rocks. But we are more disturbed by the evidence you have presented. The Quorith Collective was not involved in plots against your species, but we knew such things happened. We looked away. For that, we offer regret. Another representative spoke, this one from an aquatic species. The Depth clans have existed for 8,000 years. We have seen many young species join the Council. Most accept their place and grow slowly into power. Humanity demands power immediately. This troubles us. But, the aquatic being continued, we have also seen how the powerful abuse the weak when non-object. Perhaps humanity is correct that the system has become corrupt. Perhaps new blood is needed to remind us of our founding principles. One by one, different species offered their perspectives. Some condemned humanity's methods. Others expressed understanding of humanity's position. A few admitted that the evidence of corruption had shaken their faith in Council leadership. The political landscape was shifting in real time. Then Vrin spoke. The Korthax ambassador's scales showed complex patterns that Webb's briefing materials couldn't fully interpret. The Korthax Empire has stood for 12,000 years, Vrin said. We have seen species rise and fall. We have watched civilizations birth themselves in fire and collapse into dust. We thought we understood the patterns of galactic life. Humanity has proven us wrong. Vryn paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You are dangerous. More dangerous than any species we have encountered in millennia. Not because of your weapons, though they are formidable. Not because of your industrial capacity, though it is impressive. You are dangerous because you refuse to accept the way things have always been. The Council was designed to maintain stability, Vryn continued. To prevent the chaos of earlier ages when species fought without restraint. To create that stability, certain compromises were necessary. Younger species had to be guided, controlled, limited. For the greater good. Webb felt anger rising but forced it down. He needed to hear this. We convinced ourselves that this was wisdom, Vryn said. That our age gave us the right to dictate terms to those younger than us. We forgot that we too were once new. We forgot that the systems we built to protect peace became tools of oppression. The Korthax ambassador's scales shifted to patterns of what might have been shame. Humanity reminds us of who we were, hungry, ambitious, unwilling to accept limits imposed by others. And you force us to confront what we became, comfortable, complacent, willing, to excuse injustice because it served our interests. Vryn looked directly at Webb. You asked us to choose between the old ways and something better. The Korthax Empire chooses reform. We will support your terms, Ambassador Webb, not because you threaten us, though your threats are real, but because you are right. That statement sent waves through the chamber. If the Korthax supported humanity, other species would follow. The political mathematics were changing, but not everyone agreed. A species that looked like floating orbs of energy spoke next. The Luminari Collective rejects this extortion. We will not be dictated to by a species barely removed from their home star. We will not accept threats as legitimate diplomacy. We call for humanity's expulsion and immediate sanctions. Others joined the Luminari in opposition. The crystalline species, the metal-scaled species, and several others formed a bloc against humanity's position. The chamber divided into factions, with species declaring their positions and forming alliances. Kelthanus watched it all with an expression of deep weariness. When the declarations finally ended, he raised his hand for silence. The Council is fracturing before our eyes, Kelthanus said. This is precisely what we were designed to prevent. Division leads to conflict. Conflict leads to war. We stand on the precipice of galactic catastrophe and humanity has pushed us here. Webb stepped forward. No, High Arbiter. We revealed what was already broken. We exposed fractures that existed long before we arrived. The question isn't whether the system is broken. It's whether you're willing to fix it. Kelthanus was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke with the weight of his position. I am authorized by the Inner Circle to announce our decision. The Council accepts humanity's terms with modifications. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Webb felt his heart rate increase. This was it. Humanity will receive permanent representation on the Security Council, Kelthanus announced. However, this seat will be probationary for 10 standard years. During that time, Earth must demonstrate good faith cooperation with Council policies. Torres began to object, but Webb raised a hand. Let Kelthanus finish. The 17 species implicated in operations against humanity will face formal investigation, Kelthanus continued. Those found guilty will face sanctions appropriate to their crimes. The Vrul government in particular will surrender those directly responsible for the abductions to stand trial. The classification system dividing species into senior and junior categories will be abolished. All council members will have equal status under galactic law. The Security Council will expand to include representatives from younger civilizations. Webb listened carefully. These were their core demands, slightly modified but essentially intact. In return, Kelthanus said, humanity will agree to certain conditions. First, the dismantler technology will be placed under joint oversight. Representatives from multiple species will verify that such weapons are not deployed without Council authorization. Monroe shook her head, but Webb remained calm. Joint oversight was acceptable if it applied equally to all species. Second, Earth will reduce its military expansion rate and accept limits on certain weapon systems. These limits will apply equally to all Council members, with enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance. Third, humanity will participate in the formation of a new Council charter. This document will codify the reforms you demand and establish clearer rules governing the behavior of all member species. Kelthanus paused. These terms are offered as a compromise. They give humanity much of what you demand while addressing legitimate security concerns from other species. Do you accept? Webb looked at Monroe and Torres. They had discussed this possibility. Partial victory was still victory, especially if it established precedent for future reforms. We accept, Webb said. With one addition. Kelthanus raised an eyebrow, if the gesture could be called that on his alien face. The investigation into the 17 species must be public, Webb said. Full transparency. The galaxy needs to see that justice applies equally, regardless of a species' age or power. And the humans who were abducted and experimented on must have the opportunity to testify. Several species objected immediately, but Vryn spoke over them. The Korthax Empire supports this addition. Transparency will demonstrate that the Council has nothing to hide. Kelthanus considered for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. The investigation will be conducted publicly. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some species celebrated the compromise. Others condemned it as capitulation to human demands. The Luminari and their allies announced they were formally protesting the decision. But the mathematics were clear. Enough species supported the reforms that opposition was futile. Webb felt something release in his chest. Not relief, exactly. They had achieved their goals, but at a cost. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had burned bridges that couldn't be rebuilt. They had made enemies and allies in equal measure, and they had established themselves as a major power through force and the threat of force. The decision is recorded, Kelthanus announced. This council session is adjourned. The reforms will begin immediately. As the chamber began to empty, Vryn approached the judgment circle. His scales showed patterns of respect. You have changed everything, Ambassador Webb, the Korthax said quietly. For better or worse, the galaxy will remember this day. Webb nodded. We didn't want to change anything. We just wanted justice for our people. Perhaps, Vryn said. But you have done far more than that. You have reminded us that power without accountability becomes tyranny. That age without wisdom is just age. And that sometimes the young must teach the old how to be better. 3 months after the council session that changed galactic history, Ambassador Thomas Webb stood in a very different chamber. The renovations had transformed the council headquarters. Where once there had been hierarchical platforms showing clear divisions between powerful and weak species, now there were circular arrangements that emphasized equality. The lighting had changed too, becoming softer and less intimidating. Webb wore a new uniform today. On his shoulder was the insignia of Earth's Permanent Security Council seat. Beside him stood Monroe and Torres, along with 4 new human representatives. Earth's delegation had grown to reflect its new status. The chamber filled gradually as representatives arrived for the first session of the Reformed Council. Webb watched the dynamics carefully. Some species nodded respectfully to the human delegation. Others kept their distance. The Luminari and their allies maintained obvious coldness, refusing any interaction. The galaxy was adjusting to the new reality, and not everyone was happy about it. Vryn approached, his scales showing friendly patterns. Ambassador Webb, I wanted to speak with you before the session begins. Ambassador Vryn, Webb acknowledged. How can I help you? The trials begin tomorrow, Vryn said quietly. 17 species will face public examination of their actions. This is unprecedented in Council history. Some are concerned about what will be revealed. Webb understood the subtext. If species have nothing to hide, they have nothing to fear. And if the revelations damage relationships that have existed for millennia? Vryn asked. Then those relationships were built on lies, Webb replied. Better to face the truth and build something honest. Vrin's scales shifted to patterns of acceptance. Perhaps the Korthax have already begun our own internal investigation. We discovered that members of our intelligence service knew about the Vrul operations, but chose not to act. They believed it was better to maintain stability than to defend an unknown species. They were wrong. What will happen to them? Torres asked. They will face consequences, Vrin said. Public censure at minimum. Possibly criminal charges. The Korthax Empire is learning, Ambassador. We are relearning, I should say, what accountability means. Monroe checked her tablet. The preliminary reports are coming in from the other investigations. So far, evidence has been found against 12 of the 17 species. 5 appear to have been falsely implicated. Will those 5 receive apologies? Vrin asked. Absolutely, Webb said. Justice means admitting when we're wrong, too. The session began with Kelthanus calling the chamber to order. The High Arbiter looked better than he had 3 months ago, as if the weight of maintaining a broken system had been lifted. We gather today to formally inaugurate the reformed Galactic Council, Kelthanus announced. The changes we implement represent the most significant restructuring in our history. They come at a cost, but they promise a more just future. The first order of business was ceremonial. Each of the new Security Council members was formally recognized. When Webb's turn came, he stood and faced the chamber. Earth accepts this responsibility with humility and determination, he said. We understand that power must be balanced with wisdom. We commit ourselves to using our position to advance justice, protect the innocent, and ensure that no species ever again faces the exploitation that brought us to this moment. Some species applauded. Others remained silent. Webb didn't expect universal approval. Respect was earned over time, not granted in ceremonies. The next item was the charter amendments. Over 3 months, representatives from dozens of species had worked to codify the new rules. Monroe had been deeply involved in the process, ensuring that human interests were protected while compromising where necessary. The new charter included provisions that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Equal representation regardless of species age. Mandatory reporting of contact with younger civilizations. Strict penalties for exploitation or illegal experimentation. Independent oversight of all military operations. Transparency requirements for council decision-making. These reforms represent a fundamental shift in how we govern ourselves, Kelthanus said. They limit the power of older species while empowering newer ones. They create mechanisms for accountability that did not exist before. And they acknowledge that age alone does not grant wisdom or authority. The vote on the charter was overwhelming. 543 species voted in favor. 87 voted against. The rest abstained. The new order had a clear mandate. After the vote, Webb was approached by a representative he didn't recognize. The being was vaguely insectoid, but with features that suggested multiple evolutionary adaptations. Ambassador Webb, I am Speaker Quellis of the Tarvin Collective. We are a young species, only 40 years into space travel. We have watched your actions with great interest. Speaker Quellis, Webb said. How can I help you? We face pressure from older species to accept unfavorable trade agreements, Quellis said. Before the reforms, we had no recourse. We were advised to accept these terms as the cost of membership. Will things truly be different now? Webb considered his response carefully. File a formal complaint with the council. Detail the pressure you're facing and the terms being demanded. The new charter requires that such complaints be investigated within 30 days. If the investigation finds violations, there will be consequences. Quellis's body language suggested surprise. You believe the system will actually work? I believe we'll make it work, Webb said. That's the difference. Before, the system was designed to maintain the power of old species. Now, it's designed to protect all species equally. Will there be challenges? Yes. Will some try to exploit loopholes? Absolutely. But now there are mechanisms to fight back. Torres added, and Earth will support younger species in those fights. We remember what it's like to be powerless. We won't let others experience what we went through. Over the following hours, Webb had similar conversations with representatives from a dozen younger civilizations. They all had the same question: would the reforms matter? Would the galaxy actually change? Webb gave them the same answer each time. The system would only work if they used it, if they demanded accountability. If they refused to accept exploitation. As the session wound down, Webb found himself alone with Kelthinus. The High Arbiter approached with slow, deliberate movements. "A word, Ambassador Webb?" "Of course, High Arbiter." They walked to a viewing area that overlooked the diplomatic district. Ships from across the galaxy moved in carefully controlled patterns, each one a tiny point of light representing billions of lives. "Do you know how old I am?" Kelthinus asked. 347 years, according to your public biography, Webb replied. 349 now, Kelthinus corrected. I have served the Council for 212 of those years. I have seen species join and leave. I have mediated countless conflicts. I have truly believed that I was serving justice. Webb waited. He sensed that Kelthinus needed to speak, not to be questioned. Your arrival shattered that belief, Kelthinus continued. You showed me that the system I defended had become corrupt, that justice had become selective, that we had allowed convenience to replace principle. The High Arbiter turned to face Webb directly. I am grateful, and I am ashamed. Both feelings are appropriate, I think. You did the right thing in the end, Webb said. You supported the reforms. You acknowledged the problems. That took courage, did it? Kelthinus asked. Or did I simply recognize that refusing would lead to worse outcomes? I'm not certain my motives were as pure as you suggest. Webb smiled slightly. Motives matter less than actions. You helped create a better system. That's what history will remember. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the ships move through space. Do you think it will last? Kelthinus asked. This new order you forced upon us? I think it will last as long as people like you defend it, Webb said. And as long as species like humanity refuse to let it fail? The old order lasted because no one powerful enough challenged it. The new order will last because challenging it is now the duty of everyone. Kelthinus made a sound that might have been laughter. You've turned the galaxy into a permanent argument. Every decision will be debated. Every policy will be questioned. It will be exhausting. Yes, Webb agreed. But it will also be just. And that's worth the exhaustion. The next day, the trials began. Webb attended every session. Tun, sitting in the gallery with other observers. Dr. Monroe testified about the evidence recovered from Vrul facilities. Commander Torres presented military analysis of the attack on the diplomatic vessel. And then came the hardest part. Human survivors took the stand. They described their abductions, their imprisonment, the experiments they endured. Webb watched as the chamber listened to horrors that most species had never imagined. Some representatives left the room, unable to hear more. Others stayed, forcing themselves to confront the truth. The Vrul government had surrendered 12 individuals for trial. They sat in containment fields, their multiple eyes watching as their civilization's crimes were laid bare. Some showed what might have been remorse. Others appeared defiant. When the survivors finished testifying, the chamber was silent. Kelthinus finally spoke. The evidence is clear. The crimes are proven. The Council finds the accused guilty of crimes against sentient beings. They will be sentenced according to the maximum penalties available under galactic law. Over the following weeks, the other investigations reached similar conclusions. Not all 17 species were found guilty, but enough were that the message was clear. Exploitation would no longer be tolerated. Justice would no longer be selective. 6 months after the historic council session, Webb stood on a transport preparing to return to Earth. His term as ambassador was ending. Earth's government had decided that rotating representatives would prevent any single individual from accumulating too much power. Webb approved of the decision. Monroe and Torres were staying. Monroe had been appointed as Earth's permanent representative on the new Oversight Committee. Torres was joining an interspecies military liaison program designed to improve cooperation between different civilizations' fleets. "You're not staying for the ceremony?" Monroe asked as Webb prepared to board his transport. "My daughter should have been here to see this," Webb said quietly. She believed in what the council could be. She died trying to make that vision real. I've done what I can to honor her memory. Now it's time for others to carry on. Torres shook Webb's hand. "You changed the galaxy, sir. That's no small thing." "I revealed what needed changing," Webb corrected. "Thousands of people made the actual changes. I was just the one standing in the judgment circle." He boarded the transport and settled into his seat. As Earth's star grew larger in the viewport, Webb thought about everything that had happened, the pain, the loss, the victories and compromises. The galaxy was different now, but the work was far from finished. His communicator chimed. It was a message from Vryn. "Ambassador Webb, the Korthax Empire wishes to propose a joint research initiative with Earth. We believe our species can learn much from each other. Would you be interested in serving as a consultant?" Webb smiled. This was how the new order would work. Not through dominance or submission, but through partnership between equals. Through species learning from each other rather than exploiting each other. He typed a reply. "I would be honored to discuss this proposal." The transport entered Earth's atmosphere, and Webb looked down at the planet that had birthed humanity. A death world that had forged a species strong enough to challenge galactic order. A world that had sent its children to the stars hoping for something better. They had found something better. They had created it. And now, Webb thought as his homeworld filled his vision, now they would defend it. Not with weapons, though those remained ready if needed. But with the same stubborn insistence that had brought them this far, the insistence that justice mattered. That all beings deserved dignity. That power must be accountable to those it claimed to serve. The galaxy had learned what humanity believed. Now it would learn what humanity would fight to protect. Everything.